In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. This is such a beautiful and lyrical statement that belies the deep interior struggle and conflict that faith is for many of us. It is no news that faith can be baffling. It can be mysterious and elusive. I imagine that many of you share my lifelong struggle, like Jacob wrestling with the angel through the night, but to have a better grasp of what it means to have faith. It's hard. It's not easy. At St. Michael's, we embody and embrace the whole spectrum of positions on faith, from agnostic to the very traditional, plus everything in between. Many of you discuss quite openly what it means to have faith in ourselves, in others, faith in the system, faith in humankind. But when it comes to talking about faith in God, the dialogue is suddenly ratcheted up several notches and brings us to a much higher, more sublime way of thinking, reflecting, and perceiving about ourselves and the world we inhabit. And we are challenged by an adequate vocabulary that falls far short of describing the sometimes indescribable. Theologians referred to this as the ineffable. I find that when I think about faith and God within the context of relationships, it begins to make more sense and literally puts flesh on the concept. Gives me a type of existential frame of reference, a theological scaffolding from which I can better relate to the bizarre concept of faith, giving me a wider space to explore, gain some insight, and possibly a deep understanding of God and myself and all of us. This struggle to grasp the meaning of faith, or lack of, appears to be the undercurrent within the communities to whom all the three lessons from today address. We have Luke's gospel reading, which is about having faith in the coming of the kingdom of heaven by setting aside our worldly concerns and goods. God knows how we struggle with all the evil and brokenness of this world we live in, and how easy and tempting it is for us to busy ourselves and put all our energies in possessions and pursuits that will eventually fade away into nothing. It was no different in first century Palestine. Therefore, Jesus comforts his disciples with great compassion and tells them, "Do not be afraid, little flock, because it is your Father's, it is God's pleasure to give you the kingdom." The letter to the Hebrews, whose author is probably not Paul, we don't know. We're not even sure who it's addressed to. But it is more overtly focused on faith, a conventional faith between the individual and God, a faith based not so much on right belief, which is more about religion and orthodoxy, but on right relationship between ourselves and God. In our reading from Genesis, several Old Testament personalities such as Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Jacob are held up as exemplar persons who have lived lives of extraordinary faith, being in right relationship with God, their Creator. And with faith, we are to follow their examples, but maybe not so fast. Even though the author does not mention it, I feel quite certain that these folks from the Old Testament had several moments, days, even years when their faith was tested beyond all endurance. Times when they may have lost their faith or felt weary, angry, depressed, betrayed, or simply foolish to even think, let alone believe in this contrary, mercurial God that gives so lavishly, yet takes away in a blink of an eye. We see ourselves in them because they are very bit as human as we are, and that helps give me faith. I shared this story when I first got here almost a year and a half ago, but I was double masked, as you were then, on Zoom, so you probably didn't hear it, so I think it bears repeating, because it's important. Parker Palmer, he's a Quaker and teacher, talks openly about his struggle with depression. He is quite honest that in the depth of his suffering, he thought God or any theological beliefs or convictions were simply dead. He felt that as if he were dead. Many friends tried to help, but the one who was able to bring him back to health was a Quaker elder who visited him daily. About 4 p.m, the elder would come by, he'd sit down, he'd take off Palmer's shoes and began to massage his feet, saying very little and never giving advice. But ever so often, he would tell Palmer that he understood his struggle, affirming the suffering that Palmer was enduring. Later, in reflecting on this painful passage in his life, Palmer believes it was the elder's willingness to be present during his suffering that made all the difference and eventually brought him back to be with the living. He says that by rubbing his feet, the elder found that one place in his body where Palmer could feel a connection to another human being. Through his connection, this relationship, Palmer found new life. He rediscovered that sacred life force that connects us all. I understand it to be the incarnational presence of Christ in the midst of our lives and in our very being. It is through our relationship, being present in each other's lives, that we become cognizant of this spiritual connection with the Holy Other, with God, the world, and all of creation. And it is through these relationships that faith becomes tangible and real. Like Palmer, we may discover that in the most simple, small acts, we each can have a tremendous impact on one another and the world. I understand it to be a bit like the butterfly effect in chaos theory, the one small act that can set off a chain of events that have a tremendous effect in the ways we can never imagine or anticipate. To underscore this, I ran across a story a couple of days ago with the characters from A.A. Milne's books, Winnie the Pooh, to illustrate how relationships connects us to each other and restores our faith in God. It occurred to Pooh and Piglet that they hadn't heard from Eeyore, that's the stuffed donkey, for several days. So they put on their hats and coats and trotted across the 100-acre wood to Eeyore's stick house. Inside the house was Eeyore. "Hello, Eeyore," said Pooh. "Hello, Pooh. Hello, Piglet," said Eeyore in a glum-sounding voice. "We just thought we'd check in on you," said Piglet, "because we haven't heard from you, and so we wanted to know if you were okay." Eeyore was silent for a moment. "Am I okay?" he asked eventually. "Well, I don't know, to be honest. Are any of us really okay? That's what I ask myself. All I can tell you, Pooh and Piglet, is that right now I feel really rather sad and alone and not much fun to be around at all. Which is why I haven't bothered you. Because you wouldn't want to waste your time with someone who is sad and alone and not much fun to be around at all, would you?" Pooh looked at Piglet. Piglet looked at Pooh. And they both sat down, one on either side of Eeyore in his stick house. Eeyore looked at them in surprise. "What are you doing?" "We're sitting here with you," said Pooh, because we are your friends. And true friends don't care if someone is feeling sad or alone or not much fun to be around at all. True friends are there for you anyway. And so we are here. Oh, said Eeyore. Oh. And the three of them sat there in silence. And while Pooh and Piglet said nothing at all, somehow, almost imperceptibly, Eeyore started to feel a very tiny little bit better. Because Pooh and Piglet were there. No more, no less. Amen.